soliciting her or something.
Shit, dude needs to
Yo, straight up, let's go.
Hey! Erica! Hey, stop! Erica! Hey, stop! Hey, stop!
We are talking Stoker Hills, directed by Benjamin Lewis and stars Tony Todd. Well, it's one of these things where Tony Todd is really in one scene, but he is the named actor. And this is a partial found footage, partial traditionally filmed kind of horror mystery film. And it focuses on 3 young filmmaker students who want to go out and make their own film. And they want to make a zombie hooker film. So they're out there, these 2 guys and this 1 girl, filming a scene where this girl's kind of dressed up as a prostitute, but she is kidnapped by someone in a kind of a dark car, and the 2 others going to take chase, and it may well be this mysterious serial killer known as the Shadow. And then we also get that's all kind of in the traditional kind of found footage kind of way, and then we have the police investigation after the fact, which is kind of following it up. And that's kind of filmed in more of the traditional way. What'll happen? Well, you'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. So what do I think works in this movie? I think the movie has an interesting kind of narrative here because it never quite lets you know what's going on. It is somewhat of a meta film, obviously, having a film about kind of film students and stuff like that. You kind of know there's going to have some meta sensibilities in there, and it's kind of fun in some ways. I have to say I thought the acting here was all pretty good. Obviously you've got Tony Todd as kind of your headline here, but he's literally in kind of 1, maybe 2 scenes. But you know, he's always nice to see him. But I actually think our central cast here are all pretty good. Now the movie does an interesting thing where it really kind of splits the narrative between 2 parties. That being the kind of our kind of film students, and then the kind of really these 2 kind of police detectives, which are the kind of the lead on the case. And the time is really spent equally between them, so you don't really have a central protagonist as such. But so you almost have kind of 2 films in one, with 2 sort of different protagonists, or 2 different groups of protagonists, which kind of makes it interesting and gives it somewhat of a unique flavour. I think that kind of the mystery involving our killer is quite interesting, because you kind of wonder what the situation with him is. There's something a little bit different about him, and you may think it's going to be something, particularly kind of with the name as it is, but it might not be necessarily what you expect, although there are some kind of hints that may well be the case. Again, I don't want to say too much. There are some pretty gruesome kills in this movie. There are some a much higher body count than I was expecting. And when we do see kind of kills on screen, I thought they are done to a good standard and do seem kind of quite brutal. And it kind of goes in some ways where you don't necessarily expect it. And I think the movie was quite kind of well paced and well shot. I'm not a huge fan of having multiple kind of genres, that's in the styles of filmmaking, more like the found footage and the kind of the more traditional angle. But in this movie, I actually think they find a conceit to kind of make it work within the kind of the context of the film, where we have the police viewing the kind of the footage to kind of like get an idea about where the kids are before they try and then do their investigation. So in the context of the film, I think it works within the kind of a story sort of basis, if that makes kind of sense. So what doesn't work for me? So I do think this movie's found footage elements have some issues. The movie, I think, thinks it's quite clever in regards to film techniques and kind of knowledge and stuff like this, but I have to say the found footage portions were one of these things where you're thinking, why would they be filming this? That doesn't make kind of sense, you know. And then we have someone who's like filming something, and they'll be talking to someone, but the person who they're talking to won't be addressing the person holding the camera. They'll address the camera, which doesn't make sense in a kind of a real world scenario. So as I'm looking at the camera now, imagine I was talking to someone behind it, I would be looking at them kind of like I'm sort of demonstrating now, rather than through looking at the lens like what they do in the film, which kind of doesn't make sense because they're not talking to the camera, they're talking to the person. Things like this, and there's elements where our people are sort of clearly in danger, and you know they wouldn't have the film kind of the camera sort of, you know, in frame and all this, they'll just be running, and if they were to be carrying the camera, it'll just be sort of flying all over the place. So again, I think the found footage elements didn't come across as particularly kind of realistic. And we do have some recognisable actors here, and again, I mean, this is not a completely found footage movie, so it kind of maybe can get away with it, but I think having recognisable actors like Tony Todd in a movie which is kind of at least primarily found footage is sometimes a little bit, you don't have that kind of suspension of disbelief. It's better, I think, to have unknowns when you're having a found footage situation. I think the movie may be more of a crime drama necessarily than it certainly has horror elements to it, and there are some scenes which are quite gruesome. But when it's all said and done, actually, the majority of the screen time plays like a police procedural. And there was something about the kind of the way this kind of police investigation was going, which didn't quite ring true to me. It just didn't seem like they were real police. I don't think the acting was necessarily bad, but just the kind of the way they were kind of directed, and it just seemed like movie police is the best way I would kind of describe it, rather than kind of real policies and procedures that they'll kind of go through. Maybe the fact that they've kind of split our two protagonists as well makes it really hard to kind of sort of group to someone's kind of plight, if that makes sense. So you don't really have a central protagonist to hang on to. And I do think there are some story elements here that didn't make sense, particularly involving a doctor. And then finally, I would say the ending may be a little bit frustrating for some people. I had a quick look at IMDb at the score, and it's quite low, and I would wager it's because of the ending. I thought the movie might do something like this to try and be clever. I didn't mind it necessarily, but I think it's kind of like, it's one of those, it's the very kind of final shot of the film. I think it's something that will probably frustrate people, if I'm honest. I think they would have been better not trying to be clever and just kind of not having that very final scene. Overall, though, I still quite enjoyed it. I do think it has some kind of issues and some logic issues here and there, but I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.